Welcome back to GPS. I'm Wolf Blitzer in Jerusalem. Fareed will be back in a few moments. We just heard from the head of Hamas, Khalid Mashal. He says he laid out some specific conditions for a ceasefire. Now let's get the Israeli point of view. Mark Regev is the top spokesman for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He's joining us here in Jerusalem. So he laid out some specific conditions. Is a ceasefire, from Israel's perspective, potentially still on the table?
You know, we've had more than 7 attempts to reach either a permanent or a humanitarian ceasefire. And Hamas, every time, has closed the door, slammed the door shut, and just as you saw on Friday morning, once again, violating a ceasefire that they committed to the Qataris, and through the Qataris to the Americans and the United Nations. And so our faith in Hamas's ability to hold their fire is at an all-time low.
So there's no ceasefire?
At the moment, Israel is pursuing our operation in a way that we think is best. We are redeploying forces in a way to defend ourselves. We're finishing up the operation on the tunnels. We continue to hit their rockets, but ultimately Israel will redeploy after we think we've succeeded the maximum goals in this operation.
When you say redeploy, you mean get the ground forces, the several thousand Israeli troops who moved into Gaza, bring them back to Israel. Is that what redeployment means?
I think that, in essence, yes.
And how long will it take? I've heard anywhere from 24 to 48 hours to complete the job in destroying those tunnels. Is that accurate?
I don't want to give a specific timeline, but I think we're talking about a short period of time where we'll finish dealing with this serious threat that the tunnels pose, these terror tunnels, and of course the rest, other targets that are essential in Hamas's war machine. And then we'll redeploy in a defensive way, and if Hamas continues to attack, as they've done today, shooting more than 30 rockets into Israel, we will protect ourselves, we will defend ourselves. And I would urge Hamas, if you continue this war against Israel's civilian populations, if you continue shooting rockets into Israel, you will continue to pay a very high price.
Because the notion is that Israel will withdraw its ground forces fairly soon, but the air strikes and the naval strikes potentially against various targets that Hamas has in Gaza will continue.
I'd say more. Prime Minister Netanyahu said clearly that all options are on the table.
So what does that mean, all options?
That means you talked about air forces and naval forces. I think you shouldn't rule out the possibility of future ground incursions. If need be, we will do what needs to be done to protect our people from these attacks from Gaza.
What did you tell the government of Egypt, the President El-Sisi, who's much closer to Israel than his predecessor, Mohamed Morsi, was he's invited a Palestinian delegation consisting of the Palestinian Authority, consisting of Hamas, Islamic Jihad. They're now in Cairo. He would like an Israeli delegation to come to Cairo as well. What did you tell him?
I'm not going to go into our diplomatic contacts with various governments in the region or with the United States. I think I will say the following. Our goal is defensive. It's to end the rocket fire from Gaza into Israel, and as you reported, more than 3,000 rockets since this crisis began. To end the tunneling under Israel of these terrorists trying to come into our border, sending death squads into Israel to kill Israeli civilians. So there are goals, they're defensive. We tried to do that through an arrangement brokered by the United Nations, the United States. I think the Qataris let us all down. Hamas showed that it's not a serious partner in any sort of arrangement. They showed that clearly. And so I think Israel is thinking now, in a way, how do we do this by ourselves, maximize security, and minimize the threat?
Here's one of the major points. We just heard Khalid Mashal tell Nick Robertson in the CNN exclusive interview. He said that Israel kills civilians, Hamas kills soldiers. And he points to the fact 64 Israeli soldiers have died, 3 civilians. 1,700 Palestinians in Gaza have died. The UN says 70 or 80% of them are civilians. To that you respond?
First of all, the numbers in Gaza are Hamas numbers. And I think when this is over and the dust settles, you'll see that the number of civilians actually killed is much, much lower. Having said that, of course, every civilian death is a tragedy, and we try to avoid it. But let's be clear, Israel does not target civilians. Now, why haven't more Israelis been killed on our side of the border? It's not because Khalid Mashal and his friends haven't been trying. We've had some 3,000 rockets fired into Israeli cities, 3,000. Of them, we've had a couple of hundred that Iron Dome has intercepted. Do the math. Had we not intercepted successfully those rockets, how many Israelis would have been killed? So Khalid Mashal, when he says Israelis, civilians haven't been killed in massive numbers inside Israel, it's not because he didn't try. He tried indeed. He tried 3,000 times.
Mark Regev is the spokesman for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Thanks very much for joining us.
My pleasure.